Garlic is, in my opinion, one of the easiest things to grow in your garden. From planting to harvesting, there's not a lot you have to do. It's pretty self-sufficient. And so today I am going over how to know when your garlic is ready to harvest and then how to harvest it. Hi, my name is Rachel and welcome back to Auxhart Gardening. So these are garlics that I harvested a few days ago, up to, I think I harvested this one longer than a few days ago. I've been pulling them to kind of try and gauge how ready they are. And in order to gauge how ready they are, I've been looking at the stalks. So this right here is the garlic patch. This row goes all the way down. And right up front, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So the first few leaves of my garlic have started to dry out. And then some of the leaves farther up that haven't fully dried out are starting to. And the tips of even the green ones have started to brown. And that's how I've known that the garlic is getting ready to be harvestable. So these ones got pulled early because they started looking more dead first. They started having more browned leaves, and I didn't want them to get overripe, which could cause, this one actually is a little overripe. You can see the bulb has split a little bit. And because the skin on the outside is split, right, and this paper doesn't go all the way around, then there's a chance that this bulb is not going to store as well as this one that is nice and intact with a smooth casing to it. And so, here comes the important part. You do have a pretty big window of grace in which to harvest your garlic. You don't have to pull it like between 1 and 3 days of like being ready. You have like a couple of weeks, maybe up to a month, depending on how fast your garlic is growing, to harvest it. You'll start seeing splitting like this when the garlic is really, really close to being ready or already ready, and then you get a big rainstorm. What happens is the bulbs swell up and it takes in more water than it's ready for because it's done growing, and it just kind of floofs out, I guess. And that's what causes this splitting of the bulb. If you've ever grown tomatoes, this is the exact same thing that happens to them right when they get ripe, right? The skin, it's done growing. But if the plant takes up a lot of water at once, you'll get those cracks along the surface of the tomato. So this garlic was planted near the end of November, I believe, and it is now the middle of June that I'm harvesting it. And that is like a really standard timing for garlic, planting in the late fall, early winter, and then harvesting in the spring or midsummer. So when it comes to actually physically harvesting your garlic, there are two methods you could use. The first one is what I do, is I just grab at the base of the stalk and kind of twist and wiggle and pull out of the ground. Some people will tell you not to do this because it could damage the stalk of the garlic. And the reason that not damaging the stalk is important is because you need all of this to stay intact for the garlic to cure properly if you're trying to store it long term. The other way that you could do it, if you wanted to be a little more careful, is take a little hand shovel and like slowly kind of pop out your garlic from underneath. Personally, I think both methods are fine. I've never had any trouble just pulling garlic straight up as long as I am being careful and rocking it out of the soil rather than yanking. But if you wanted to be more careful, like, there's definitely no problems with taking the careful route. I just personally don't have the patience to sit there with a hand shovel and kind of pry every single one out of the ground. So once you get your garlic out of the ground, you'll notice that it has dirt on it and you want to not wash it. You can definitely wipe some of the dirt off with your fingers, but if you're trying to cure it for long-term storage, you don't want to wash it right now. So if you're not using your garlic immediately or within the next couple of weeks or so, after you pull it, you're probably going to want to cure it so that you can continue using it until the next growing season, and also potentially save some of it for seed to plant again. Whether you're saving it for seed or for eating, the process is the same. Anything you don't eat, you could just plant. However, it is my recommendation that you pick all of the nicest looking ones and say, these are the ones that I want my garlic to look like next year, and so these are the ones that I am going to save to plant again. The curing process for garlic is pretty straightforward. First of all, like I said, you want to make sure you don't get it wet because we're going to wait for it to dry out. So you're going to leave the roots attached, you're going to leave all the leaves attached, and you are going to put it somewhere flat. This can be out in the garden, this can be in your garage, in a shed. The main point here is that it is dry and it is out of direct sunlight. So if you have, like, I don't know, some shady tree outside that you want to put them under, or if your garden is like tall enough to where you can set them in between the rows of your garden and they're going to get some shade most of the day, that is also an option. You will see people kind of line them up where the leaves of one shade the bulbs of the next one, and that is also an option. But keep in mind, if you do leave them outside, if it rains, that can screw up the curing process. So if you're going to leave them outside, keep an eye on the weather. What I would normally do is I would try to make sure to pick them when you see that there's at least a couple of days of dry weather in the forecast. Leave them outside for those first couple of days, and then after that, if it's going to rain, go ahead and bring them inside somewhere where they can stay for 2 to 6-ish weeks to finish curing. Alright, and once you have laid your garlic out to cure, you'll know that it's done when the roots are getting crispy. This is the one that I picked a while ago. Roots are getting crispy and the foliage has fully died back. You can see in here, this is still green, feels alive in the center. This is not done curing. This is partially done. You can see it's definitely looking more dead and dry and crispy than the other ones. Curing can happen really fast if you live somewhere that's really dry and you can leave them outside for, a couple of weeks. They might already be cured. If you are trying to cure them in a garage, somewhere where you can get ventilation, but it's not as heavy ventilation as being in the actual outdoors, it's going to take a bit longer. Right? And that is basically the gist of everything you need to know. But before I leave you, I want to address a couple of questions that you might have. The first one is, what if I pull it too early? What if I think my garlic is ready and I pull it up and there's no bulb? So if you did pull it early, it's still quite edible. That's not a loss. It is just small. And if you peel it open, you will probably see itty bitty little cloves have started to form. However, if you're growing hardneck garlic, you might run into the issue where you're growing hardneck garlic in a warm climate. And if your winters don't get cold enough, then your hardneck garlic is not going to bulb up the way that it would if it had that period of cold. Okay, and on the flip side of that, what to do if you pull them too late and they end up splitting like this? Well, they are still perfectly edible. They're just not going to store long term. So you can set aside all of your ones that look like this and use them up first, and that will usually be perfectly fine. If you have a lot of them, you can go ahead and dehydrate them or preserve them in some way, and I actually have a whole video about that up here. This next one is probably not going to be very applicable to you, but to the few of you that have seen this, this will be very helpful. So this garlic has turned blue, and I don't know of any naturally blue garlics, but garlic famously turns blue when people preserve it in vinegar. It turns blue or bluish green when exposed to an acid. So if you are picking garlic that looks like this, there's a chance that something acidified your soil. The pH that it would take to do this, I had a hard time pinning that down, but it seems to be somewhere between 4 and 5 on the pH scale, maybe up to 5.5. That could cause this sort of color change. And I only found it on one of my bulbs, which means that something very local happened to acidify the soil, and it's not probably indicative of a larger problem. But something like this, it is still perfectly edible. It is fine. It is just blue. And there are actually some cultural practices where they intentionally turn their garlic blue by preserving it in vinegar or other acids, and it's beautiful. It's meant to be blue, so it is very safe to eat your blue garlic, as long as you can tell for sure that it is not like blue in a ring kind of way, the way mold would be. I also did want to point out that today the garlic that I am using to demonstrate, this is huge garlic. I don't know of any varieties really that are this big. I was super surprised to see my garlic get this big. This is Dixon Softneck from the Experimental Farm Network, and this is my other variety of garlic. I'll have to put that on the screen because I can't remember the name of it. But this is more of what I expect when I'm growing garlic, and this is a monster. So if your garlic looks more like this, that's probably very normal. And if your garlic looks like this, then congratulations. But a good gauge for how big your garlic is supposed to be when it's ready is, I would recommend taking a picture of the cloves or the head before you split it into cloves of the one that you're planting next to like your fist or something that's not going to change in size that you're going to have with you. And then look at your garlic next to your fist when you pull it and see if it's the same size as the one that you planted. If it's smaller by like a lot, then it was probably young. So hopefully that can help you out. Alright guys, that is all from me today, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I wish you, until next time, happy gardening.